I think that one of the most important things to understand about Hitler becoming chancellor um, is the confusion that various people had about who was taking advantage of whom. But nearly every political party in some way believed that the cabinet that was created was not what it seemed. From a communist perspective, um, even though Hitler was chancellor, really he was just a popular front for large industrial capitalists, um, the sort of people who might have been represented by a member of the cabinet whose name was Alfred Hugenberg, who was himself a great friend of the industrialists. So, and of course, von Papen thought that he was secretly controlling Hitler from behind. And the National Socialists believed that even though they only held really three key positions, obviously they had the chancellor position, um, and then they had the Ministry of the Interior, uh, and then the Nazi Goering was given control of the Interior Ministry of Prussia, which was by far the largest area in Germany. So even though they only had these limited things, I think they believed that they were in control because this gave them the control of the police. And those two positions had been essential for Hitler to accept the chancellorship when he was making those negotiations. The second big condition that I think you want to remember is that Hitler demanded that new elections be held on March 5th. So he was really only committing to being chancellor for a little more than a month. So I think the key thing to remember then is that the National Socialists took part in the government and Hitler became chancellor under two conditions. Those two conditions were that they would control the interior ministries and that elections would be held on March 5th. And so the second of these conditions required that they take advantage of the first of these conditions as quickly as possible. And this they did. So by February 17th, Goering has already ordered the Prussian police to stop monitoring the National Socialists. This leads to a huge surge in Nazi violence from the brown shirts. They're no longer being kept in check by the police, and so they're free to carry out attacks on their political rivals. Goering goes even one step further, and on February 22nd, he creates an auxiliary police, which brings in members of the brown shirts, the black shirts, brings in these Nazi paramilitary groups, and gives them the sort of seal of approval of the state. So now you have Nazis acting, and sort of legally as police, doing their same political violence that they've been doing all along, but it's now state sanctioned. So this gave them a huge advantage moving towards the elections of March 5th, which is that they could use legalized violence to intimidate their political opponents. The National Socialist platform was, it's easiest to understand as just being purely anti-Marxist, that the Marxists were going to be crushed and that Germany wouldn't have to worry about a German Bolshevik revolution. And this is the main rhetoric that we see in February is that a vote for the Nazis is a vote to end the Marxist threat. There is violence carried out by Nazis against the Center Party, the Catholic Party, and this makes sense if you think about it because the Center Party really hadn't lost votes to the Nazis, and so it would be easy strategically to think of them as a threat. Whenever this violence is carried out, Hitler will come forth and denounce it and say that these are people who are trying to discredit the Nazi Party. But I think our evidence makes it pretty clear that this is pretty disingenuous, and that there was a coordinated effort to eliminate threats. Of course, on the far left, but also on even in the Catholic sort of center right. And there's a big effort to bring industrialists on board. They may very well have also thought that they were controlling and manipulating Hitler. On February 20th, they're all called to Goering's house. Hitler gives a speech where he really essentially threatens that there would be a civil war if the National Socialists don't win the elections in March. And for businessmen who want stability to do their business, this is the biggest nightmare. And then Hitler leaves the room, and they're literally just all asked for money, for great sums of money. And so then they all sort of pull out their checks and pay up. So by the middle to end of February, it's clear to see the ways that that we can imagine the National Socialists had planned to take over power from when they took over in January. In other words, we see their plan: hold a quick election, legitimize violence, use it to intimidate opponents. And it's not clear how successful this plan would be, but we at least can see the shape that it was taking. But on February 27th, something unexpected happens, which is that, by all accounts, sort of a lunatic, a crazy person, Ernst van der Lubbe, tries to burn down the Reichstag, where the German parliament would meet. And he tries to do that on the night of the 27th. And this is instantly seized upon by the National Socialists as an opportunity, a crisis, and it's instantly blamed on the communists and is declared to be the beginning of a communist uprising. There's basically no evidence that that's true. And some people have also suggested that van der Lubbe was actually acting and encouraged sort of by the National Socialists. I think that evidence is not particularly credible either. But so if we just accept that it's a lunatic in one act of violence, which then the Nazi propaganda machine is able to roll into, this is the beginning of the German Bolshevik uprising. So immediately that night, the police are out arresting communists. By 11 a.m. the next day, the National Socialists have written up a decree, which they get President Hindenburg to sign. And this has, it has 6 articles in the decree. But I think it's the first 2 that we really want to concentrate on. The first one suspends basic civil liberties: freedom of assembly, freedom of press, freedom of the speech. So it gives the government the power to silence opposition, essentially. The second allows the cabinet, so Hitler and the other members of the government, who are not all Nazis. Remember, they only have the 3 cabinet positions, Hitler and then these 2 interior positions. But it gives them the power to take all measures to restore public safety and to take this power from the president. So it delegates power that should have belonged to Hindenburg, according to the Constitution, and it gives that to the government, to the cabinet, which is going to be, essential moving forward. And then the 4th and 5th articles of the decree just increase punishments for various crimes, and then the 6th one just says, this is going to take place today. But so there are 6 parts of this decree, which we call the Reichstag Fire Decree. But this is what gives legal cover for what comes next. And it is legal because the Weimar Constitution, Article 48, gives Hindenburg the power to rule by decree. He signs this decree, handing over more power to the cabinet and restricting civil liberties. So in that sense, there's this constitutional restriction of the power of the president and also the power of the people. And then, immediately members of the Communist Party, are targeted. They're targeted through violence. They're targeted through press censorship. On March 3rd, the head of the Communist Party is arrested. And the Reichstag fire decree is used to essentially eliminate the communists as an electoral threat. But crucially, the strategy does not call for banning the Communist Party, which was definitely inside the scope of what this decree could have done. But the Communist Party isn't banned. And there are probably two good reasons for this. I think that the National Socialists feared that there would be backlash if they banned the third largest party in the recent elections. But also, I don't think it would have served their purposes even if there wouldn't have been a backlash. Because who would those communist voters have gone to? They almost certainly would have gone to the Social Democrats, who would have been the sort of legitimate left. So you sort of had a win-win situation, I think, from the National Socialist point of view, which was the communists would be weakened, but that in turn the communists would still draw votes off from the Social Democrats. And it would be easy to delegitimize the Communist Party. The Communist Party had never supported the Weimar Republic. But if the real enemy, despite all of the anti-Marxist rhetoric, if the real enemy for the National Socialists in the March 5th election was the Weimar Republic, then the communists served a role then in pulling support away from Weimar and pulling support away from the Social Democrats. So I think that's a crucial piece of strategy. That's a crucial thing to understand as we move into the actual elections.